Welcome to Mindrolling, and I'm Raghu Marcus, and my good buddy on the other side of the East Coast is
David Silver, hi.
hi. So David was here a couple of weeks ago, and we were fortunate enough to corral Ramdas into doing a podcast with us, and he happened to, or visiting him just happened to be was Rameshwar Das, who we call Ramesh for short, and he is the co-author, wrote with Ram Dass, Be Loved Now, and they are working on a new book. Not working. They finished it, Dave.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, yeah. And it's called Polishing the Mirror. A way to live from the spiritual heart. So this will be our manual here, that because we talk so much about how to get along day to day, and certainly why we bring up Ram Dass so much is because of his way of articulating how to get along day to day and how to be mindful and look at what's going on in your life and relating it to a real progression of everything that comes your way is an opportunity to transform ourselves day to day. That was long-winded, but Dave, tell me what you,
it's true.
it's
It's
true,
true.
no?
No, that's true. That's exactly true. I mean, he's always been as high a being as he is. He's always been very pragmatic in the way he describes how to get into the present and how to find peace in your heart.
Mm.
And
Mm.
but he's never, in my experience, in all the years that we've been aware of him and have known him, he's never been an airy-fairy type of human. He'll tell you it as it is, and it
Yeah.
helps. It's been so helpful to so many of us, really.
And he's still doing it. I mean, I'm just thinking about, because I listened to the interview that we did, and we talked to him about telling the truth, and he talked about little white lies that we all tell all the time that we need to take a look at, and he used himself, as he's always done, as an example for little white lies, and I won't get into it now, but
I tried to identify with that, but I've never told a lie.
really, he,
No, I try all the time, but I just am such a truth teller.
I have not known this about you, and now I am just shocked and awed by your honesty. You lying fool. Um,
That's correct.
Anyhow, it is. We do this stuff all day long. We don't even know what we're doing. So it's really a great interview. It's not an interview. It's just a hangout. We're hanging out with the two of them actually, and
Yep.
bringing up a few different things. So this goes back for David and I, to be serious for a moment, 40 years or so, more or less for each of us,
Yeah.
and it's it is it has been a rudder in our lives. It's been the glue. I don't mean Ram Dass the personality. I mean what that represents, what we got when he first came back from India, and that how that has affected us since then, because we have followed onto a path that he enunciated, basically. And so this means a lot to us, and I'm really happy that we were able to hang out with him a little bit. And David, I want to introduce you to a wonderful fact.
Oh, I can't wait.
The Mindrolling podcast store is
Ah,
open.
ah, ah, ah.
Did you get your T-shirt? Yes, I did give you a T-shirt. Are you wearing it?
No, I did not get a T-shirt. That's not true. There's a
It's
lie
not.
right there,
Oh,
right there.
Jesus. Oh, God.
I got a mug. I got a mug though,
You
because
got a mug.
I managed to abscond with it from your office.
Well, David came up with "mug your mind" as because we were trying to think, what the hell is this mind rolling all about? And he thought of "mug your mind," and boy, great little catchphrase, my friend, Mister Silver.
Came to me in a blinding flash of light.
Yeah, I bet. I
Yes.
bet. The store is open, everybody, folks. It's another way to support us. We've got a couple of, so we've got, our pretty nice logo. If you've seen mindrollingpodcast.com on the web, you've seen the actual logo of Mindrolling. And so we've got that, and we've also got the Mug Your Minds. We've got a couple of different T-shirt colors. So let's, I'd love to share. Anybody's got ideas about what else we could carry that people would like? I mean, we're thinking of a what was that? A balance kit. Is that what we're going to call it? We're thinking of a kit where we would provide, little doodads to keep yourself straight all day, from a little mala, which is a little rosary from India, beads, and a little bit of music to keep you, maybe some chanting, a little meditation thing. I bet we can get one of Ram Dass's meditations and put it on a little thumb drive or something. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, at this point it's still sort of fantasy, but the T-shirts and the mugs are there.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you buy those, we'll be able to do the R&D to put together the balance kit.
Okay, got it. All right, enough said about that. So,
Okay.
and enough said about everything. At this point, we want to just go ahead and play this hangout that we did with Ram Dass and Ramesh from Mindrolling Podcast. Hi, Ram Dass. Hi, Ramesh.
Hi, Raghu and David.
Hi, good afternoon.
So let's see. We got a few things that we want to talk about, and we found this thing, Ram Dass, many years ago. David and I interviewed you about honesty. And we had this but it went way further than just talking about honesty. And we have this gigantic manuscript that got transcribed, which has fabulous stuff in it that we wanted to talk about. Now, in an early lecture, Ram Dass, you talked about the moment that you met Maharaji. In those moments, once he said in spleen in English, that was a transformational moment, and your mind stopped, etc., etc. And once that happened, you went off to KK's. You were shown Indian family life. You were given a teacher. You didn't think twice about any of it. You just surrendered to the process, is what you said. And it wasn't something that you decided to do, because we've been talking a little bit about, obviously, what that word is. David and I have been sort of bantering back and forth about it. So that moment, that was the critical moment, one could say that it was like there was no turning back. In fact, in the interview, David, what is it that you said?
I asked you, Ram Dass, where's the old guy? I don't mean old in age, but the guy that was there before you met Maharaji. And you said he's not here anymore. He's gone, and has been gone since that moment. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about
that moment. Yeah.
That moment, yes.
As I've come to understand, the critical moment was Maharaji looking at me with unconditional love. And that really, but that interview must have been when I was impressed with the miracles. Usually when I talk about that interview, I talk about the Land Rover and my I didn't trust Maharaji, and I was a Buddhist and a Westerner. And I was not gonna give in, as KK said. I had my hands in my pockets,
Right.
and that was the
Was the unconditional love what dissolved that old personality? Not in one moment, but that was the beginning of that letting go of that.
Now I think that I didn't at the moment feel that.
The moment just, it must have been immersion in
Yeah,
love.
The whole interview was mind shattering. It was the miracles and the love. But the previous Richard Alpert, because that was a time of Richard Alpert, not Ramdas, was paranoid and not feeling lovable.
Would it be reasonable to say, Ramdas, that even an epiphany like that, that blast of unconditional love, still took a lifetime to incorporate truly, authentically into your awareness?
Yeah. When I saw that I was staying in India so long, and when I recalled that, I said that the only thing that was I'm home, and home was my heart. Home was with the heart, and I can't imagine that I would have, my previous personality would have been able to stay at KK's and stay at the temple.
But going back to that moment when you experienced that and was, a moment of opening and letting go in the extreme, Maharaji really used that primal love in your development, your mother, as like a pry bar to open you up.
Well,
and it was almost like that love, he built on that with his love.
The night before that I thought about my mother, that was the first time I thought about my mother in spiritual terms. And I did that on my own, and it was interesting because he picked up that spiritual link, and because I never would have never think about my mother, and of course, because she died, the spleen, he sort of split my my self-esteem, because I was a psychologist and I was a professor and all that stuff, and yet he had done stuff I didn't even understand. Like I was a little boy once again.
So the professor mind was blown out of the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have the moment, that moment, and yours was an extreme moment. I mean, there was just an extreme moment of transformation. And so I think of that as, it was, you were implanted, the heart got implanted by Maharaji, and that powerful moment, there was no turning back. You could not, and you said that in this particular talk, there was no turning back to being Richard Alpert, to former personality. Although all that personality was there, I guess one could say that there was no more identifying with that former personality. So we kind of just played with this word, you were implanted then. And I was thinking about myself when I first heard that talk that was sent to the radio station where I was, when they were trying to get me to promote you speaking at McGill University all those years ago. And for that matter, Ramesh, I know when you were at Wesleyan and Ram Dass came and you had no expectations except for, a talk about psychedelics or something. When I heard those words, and you can tell me if you feel the same way, but when I heard those words, I was entirely convinced in that moment I was implanted in, I guess it's a trust. And then we talked about trust, faith. Some little kernel of faith came into me by hearing these words, the tone, the vibration, where this was coming from, which I did not know at the time. From that moment on, that was more powerful. I mean, not more powerful, but that was more elemental to me than when I actually got to Kenchi and met Maharaji. And as soon as he walked out the door, my first thought was, oh, that's what Ram Dass was about. I mean, I knew, then I connected. Did you have that experience in seeing him that first time in Wesley?
Well, I think I did, but although I think implant isn't the way I would describe it at all. I think that it was more of a change in point of view to
perspective,
seeing things from where Maharaji was.
Yeah.
And that when I got to Kenchi, I had that same experience, and I realized at that moment that he had come through Ram Dass, and that was the same darshan at Wesleyan that I had when I got to Kenchi.
Right.
And that interview was what I said. I was bringing a jewel back from India, and that was the jewel. It was it was
his
unbelievable,
presence.
Unbelievable.
Well, what we've been talking, taking this further, and some of this is related with the kinds of feedback that we've been getting with the podcasts. from people who are, talking to us about how to navigate their day-to-day lives. Do they need to get to India to meet somebody like this? All of these kinds of, important questions, especially for this new generation. So we started then talking about, we had this extreme example, yours, Ram Dass, being the most extreme, where that moment was, just an incredible pivot to, as you say, to another perspective. And that's what, I guess we're meaning by calling it you were implanted then. And just that's a term, a new generation can get, really strongly about what that is. But those, we know tons of people that that had that moment without that entirely big dramatic experience that you had, and then following that, what we had with you, and then of course going over there ourselves. Just say a little something about how people can have that change in perspective. That moment can happen without being with a physical manifestation of it, and because we've seen it. How can it happen, Ram Dass?
Well, because how you and Ramesh had it by heart to heart. I translated a story, and you fell for it.
Hook, line, and sinker, as they say.
Yes, to say the least. We fell for it, all right. But
and you didn't go to any place.
we were, yes, no, you're saying yes, it happened in that moment, and we were absolutely, we were where we were in that moment, and we didn't have to go anywhere. But
the book
Autobiography.
for Yogi. Lots of people got it.
Yeah.
Through Autobiography of Yogi.
Yeah.
I think maybe we can talk about it in terms of Maharaji, but in the more generic way, it's coming into the presence of love and being fully in that present moment and getting pulled out of your discursive mind.
Pulled out of your personality,
Mm-hmm.
Your personality that has been raised in fear and anxiety and unlovableness.
Mm.
But now it seems that, that was then, 40 years ago. Now there's yoga studios everywhere. There's, new age books, and people of 25, 30, have access to all of this. Indirectly, maybe. But does that give you a sense of evolution of a generation? That at that time, all we knew was whatever we knew. For me, it was Meher Baba, because the Who loved Meher Baba. And it was
funny. We're all, Ram Dass too, right? Ram Dass, that was your first glimpse of hearing of the Eastern.
Yes.
Meher Baba, me too. That's funny.
And others, of course. But then when I went to Hilda Charlton's meditation, and you guys had come back and started talking about Maharaji, that was the first. Even though it wasn't direct for me, it was the first powerfully indirect thing. Because I remember Ram Dass, you came back after his Mahasamadhi and talked to Hilda's class about your feelings at that time. And that was the most powerful thing for me, Because I saw you weren't being sentimentalized, you weren't being, sort of teary-eyed. You were very quiet, you were very matter-of-fact. You spoke about it as if it was a natural happening that now you guys would have to deal with. And the amount of, it wasn't sentimental, but it was very, very passionately saddened. As I remember you and Ramesh and KD and Raghu, and I observed this and was totally moved by it. I thought, my goodness, the amount of loss here, even though ultimately I suppose it isn't loss, I could feel it. But I go back to my original question is, now 25-year-olds are doing asanas and are, all of that without an in-the-body guru. Is this a sign, a hopeful sign of generational evolution?
I certainly think there is evolution in consciousness. I think the asanas first of all, they're body beautiful things, and then the teachers start to talk about yoga. The broader, I think we shouldn't underestimate the psychedelics. And these young people, pot and acid and DMT and some of these things, they had drugs in their mind. I mean, not in their mind or in the mind.
Well, that and a lot of their parents used them quite a lot.
Yeah.
But I think the accessibility of the toolkit for doing inner work is much greater. That seems pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Yes.
The
Meditation and stuff.
meditation and yoga and, however, whatever, sometimes people get into yoga on a very superficial level and it just carries them in because that's what yoga does. But I still think the commitment to inner exploration, whether it's through psychedelics or yoga or meditation or whatever, is still, that's something that happens on a very individual basis, and that transmission of the heart is still pretty much one-to-one, however much of a cultural phenomenon and, happening in bhakti fests and things is.
There's mainstream music. The musicians started their consciousness. For example, the Beatles, they produced changes in consciousness for their devotees.
And the Grateful Dead created concerts which were communal events. Instead of being, a proscenium march with a band and everybody clapping. Yeah. Remember at the Goddard Media Conference, when the Dead played and we were all there, and I remember it so well, that it was not like a concert. It was an event, it was a love, sort of like an ocean of love right there in Vermont. And I wasn't even a fan of the Dead, but I just remember that, and we were all there. And that was 1969, was it?
70.
1970, yeah.
I want to change gears a little bit here. Some of what we're talking about, and when you all talk about yoga and the accessibility, Ramesh, you talked about it, the accessibility of the toolkit certainly lends itself to more people having access to finding that moment, the implant moment, or whatever you know the we the perspective implant. How about that? A new perspective, and then the world looks a lot different to you at that time. But we know, I mean, we're getting mail, and we're talking to people on Facebook and Twitter and all that, and they are not necessarily into yoga, and they don't know much about meditation. They're mostly concerns that we're hearing are, I'm caught up in identifying with the work that I do, and I'm unhappy there, or I am caught up in desire systems and doing or negative thoughts. How do I deal with that stuff? And from a very practical level. And I just found something, Ram Dass. This was I don't know. Oh, it comes from this wonderful series called the Listening Hearts series, and by the way, everybody who's listening right now, you can go to ramdass.org or write to info@ramdass.org, and we can lead you to some of the source material of what we are talking about or mentioning here. And this is from the Listening Heart series. So this conversation, I don't know if you recall, because as Dave said, it's a long time ago, and he doesn't remember anything.
I do not.
He doesn't remember last week.
It's not true.
6 years ago.
It's not true. It's a lie.
So it was about being honest with yourself. And I'll just read this little quote. There's a process of being very honest with yourself about what you need at any point along the way. Maharaji said to me many years ago, give up sex and money and you'll know God. Thus far, I've given up neither of them, but it's only 25 years so far. The transmission's very slow. I mean, what does he really mean is the way I keep hearing it. So I think, I've always considered we got a lot of this directly from you when we first heard those first lectures about the ability to be honest with yourself, not only in this case about what you need and what you need to hear at any point, but also about where you're at. And can you talk more about that honesty? And does it lead, is that the first precursor of awareness?
Well, Maharaji, when he said, Ram Dass, tell the truth. And I was, that shocked me because I had been telling untruths or white lies. And nobody ever noticed them because everybody else was doing them. And because I was living a dual life in my sexual activities, because there was at that time homosexuality was not a great thing, and I was used to that. I was used to these white lies. And when he said, speak the truth, Ram Dass, and love everybody. I couldn't understand
How you were going to do that?
you probably not, but I was. He was making it an issue. The issue of truth was our culture had it very much not focused about that, not focused on that. And after I, when I spoke my truths in lectures, I saw how many people came up and congratulated me about my truth. But that was Maharaji.
I think you're speaking truth in the way and sharing your ups and downs in your spiritual path allowed a lot of other people to be straight up with their own truths and untruths also. I mean, that was, it really lightened the load for other people to be able to be truthful with themselves.
Very much so. Very
The
much.
other, Maharaji really worked with you on a number of levels. So there was that thing about Gandhi that he spoke to you about, which was a lot about truth. And then the thing that you came to about Gandhi saying that there's absolute truth and there's relative truth, and the relative truth can change.
Yeah.
But the deeper truth is the one that I guess we all keep trying to approach and bring forth, and that's also about honesty. I mean, it's about the temporality of existence, and it's the Buddhist truth of suffering and death, and all those levels.
But I want to bring it down to, because I think exactly what you said, which we got in those initial talks that you gave, Ram Dass, was your ability to confront your own truths about where you were at, and desire systems and attachments and so on and so forth. Disturbing emotions, all of it, as Ramesh, as you said, that gave us a chance to look at our own stuff without fear, without so much fear. And of course there was that love quotient, which allowed us to have some kind of ease with which to do that. And so Ram Dass, is this ability of self-honesty, how does that relate to the big awareness, mindfulness, that seems to be necessary on a day-to-day basis in order to, get on with being free?
Well, when you lie, that it leaves stuff in your mind, leaves trash in your mind.
Certainly increases your own separateness.
Yeah, increases you. That's right. And you got to remember who you lied to. And and that's the right in separateness.
Right.
Or delusion.
Yeah.
Both.
And I think because of my homosexuality, becoming in the closet, I was so aware of who I was lying to and who I was.
Right.
And then the drug, the psychedelics. I was playing games with psychedelics. Those things forced me to confront that lying was corroding me, and I started to see people. They came up and said how I was truthful. My God.
Little did you know.
Well, no, by then I was truthful.
That combination of love and truth that Maharaji laid on us, and much of it through Ram Dass. The love really created the opening, the acceptance of everything, and anything that you could be, that you felt bad about, could still be in that love, and you could lay it out there, and it wouldn't be turned against you.
I mean, the sexual and psychedelic things of my past, Maharaji accepted that in me, and he loved me, and that was so unbelievable, as Richard Alpert, really. Those lies had been ingrained in my behavior to exist, and never that I could ever be loved for those things. God.
Not only did he love you for it, but he was pretty playful with you about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about you gave him your best teachings.
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's a great line. Oh, boy. Talk about, yeah. But I just, if we were to say anything to somebody about, I mean, I know you talk, Ram Dass, a lot about it, and we all talk with each other about how to deal with any reaction, either to you realize that you've not been telling the truth, you realize you've been caught in a negative fantasy, you've been caught in anger, whatever it is, the ability to love yourself through that, love that, as you have said so many times recently when you've talked about coming from the vantage point of spiritual heart rather than mind ego, the methodology is to actually love rather than reject those disturbing emotions, thoughts, or whatever. Is that the beginning of awareness?
Yeah,
That's almost the purpose of awareness.
The purpose.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I've got a new line now.
Oh.
When I find those no-nos in my my mind, I love them to death.
It reminds me of something you said quite some time back in another talk. The neurosis that I have had when I first met Maharaji, that I still have them now. Not one of them has gone. This is some years ago. I'm sure your vantage is different, but the interesting thing was, and I think this is really so important for people to have. You said that although they are still there, they've become like little shmoos, and so I am not buffeted or disturbed by them the way that I used to be.
Yep.
So is that? I think that's when I look back on my own time, since my implant of a new perspective. David is shaking his head at me.
Well, it sounds like a tooth thing.
No.
I think you got to stop using this implant thing. It sounds like an alien invasion.
Alien or
It is.
teeth.
It is exactly an alien invasion, because it's completely new. Anyhow,
It's an invasion of yourself into yourself.
Yes. Well, there you go. I just think that this conceptually, this is so important for people to be able to grasp. I think this particular teaching and everything we've been talking about here. I kind of want to. We're running out of time here a little bit because we promised not to take too much of your time. I just want to talk about one other thing. And Ram Dass, I've mentioned this to you, and I've done a podcast where I have talked about this, and it was an experience with my father passing this past month, and sitting before he passed, sitting with him one day with another family member, greater family, satsang, and sitting in the room with him, and got into a very deep place, and I only, as I started talking about it, I could only get a reference point from that place to when I was sitting with Maharaji in Kenchi, and first, or at any time, wherever, where there was complete loss of time and space. You could any thoughts that came, you could just see them slowly evaporating over your head, so to speak. They, time really, everything slowed down. And in this talk that I had picked up that you had done some years back, you talked about, you said something about being with dying people allows me to be on the edge of awakening. And that edge of awakening hit me so powerfully that I realized it while I was talking about it in the podcast, the complete transparency of those experiences. They were the same experiences, yet one was, in this perspective with my father in a deep meditative space, and the other was sitting with Maharaji. Can you talk about that edge of awakening and how what it is, and how we could bring more of that into our lives without necessarily being with dying people or being with a realized being?
Well, the dying person, that relationship is in truth. And because the dying is truthful, and you have to be truthful to be in that, to be bedside. And when you have to truth in relationships, you will find those moments will force you into the truth of the one, and when you identify with your soul, it's the soul is infinite, and that infiniteness gives you a purchase on looking at time and space, because we are time and space addicts.
So you're getting a taste of the infinite from the person going out.
Yeah, and then Maharaji is infinite, because that's where his consciousness is. And when we were in his space, in his vibrational space, we got that
At least an inkling of it.
yeah.
In your conversation with Roshi Joan Halifax that I worked on recently, you spoke about it as being the soul watching the incarnation.
Yeah.
And therefore bringing about this dynamic.
Yeah.
That is the key, I think, in many ways, going back to what we were talking about earlier, too, of how people can deal with their negative stuff, their other stuff, their mind stuff. It's getting that perspective. That's the change in perspective, is seeing it from the soul place. And that the soul is what, as you're saying, you love yourself to death. And that's what releases that stuff. Because, if you push away the negative stuff, which we all do on occasion, it just reinforces it.
Yeah. On occasion is fairly often, it seems to me.
Habitually.
We have these bad habits, yes, we do, and that's what people are asking about. Is where to put the brakes. It's I try this, I try. There's too much of you're coming from exactly the place that's reinforcing those the habitual habits when you're trying to do something. So it's a very delicate balance, is it not? That awareness without judgment and so on, and what it does go full circle back to the moment when you experience unconditional love in whichever way that you do, through a book, through someone else, through hearing someone sing a kirtan, through a meditation. Suddenly you're in the middle of a course or something. So it can be anywhere that you do experience that transcendental moment of unconditional love. I guess that is the key, and that is that thing which allows you to suddenly have your perspective completely shift, and therefore your life shifts.
Mm-hmm. It's also just, in a way, it's a strategic way of working with your stuff, because loving it is accepting it.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing that Maharaji did with us. I mean, he certainly saw us for all of our desires and negative stuff that we were carrying, our baggage we were carrying with us.
Yeah. I think he saw our souls, and I don't think we presented our egos, but
that's wasn't what he was concentrating on.
Well, the perfect story is you tell this story. In fact, the three of us happened to be there, along with some other Westerners. It was in Kenchi by his office, and Ram Dass, you were saying, we're so impure, you were just, it was just feeling depressed. I mean, we all felt this at one time or another because of the pure mirror and that reflection of how impure we are. And he said, "You're not impure. I let you peel potatoes in the back, don't I?" You remember that moment? And that's seeing nothing but the soul. No, absolutely. But I guess more of the sharing that you're doing so much these days, Ram Dass, that we are all doing wherever we can, is reassuring people that this is all available without a dramatic incident, as yours was the most dramatic. And I think we need to keep emphasizing that, because we see people who are absolutely coming to the path and understanding, and working on themselves and getting some awareness and having that desire overtake the other desires and the habitual mind stuff that we all get into. So,
and it can be anything like a podcast that turns you on.
Exactly. Well, we've come to the end of it. We can actually, we should just say thanks, Ram Dass, and thanks, Rameshwar Das, and thank you, David, and thank me.
Thank you.
And thanks for all of it, for all of us. But, hey, turn the camera back on so we can say goodbye. Wow, that was really a pretty wonderful again, a hangout, I'd call it, because it got really, it's wonderful just to hang out with Ram Dass, and in this case also with Ramesh, in a way that's that loose and we can just talk about one thing or another. I think we talked about a lot of great things.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I think that, talking about his early battles with being honest and open, that syndrome doesn't go away. Everyone has that in all times. And he was so good about that and about lying. And, he was great about getting rid of the little schmooze.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that stuff. That's incredible. So we're so happy he was there. And Rameshwar Das was extremely informative, as always.
And, just one last thing to say about this, just so everybody knows, obviously at the end of the hangout, shall we call it, I talked to Ram Dass about this experience I had with my father and his passing last month, and just something I experienced, which I found, fascinating. The whereas being in this state with him, Ram Dass called it the edge of awakening, and being when I was with Maharaji in India with Ram Dass, that was the same situation. He explained that out so great, didn't he? I mean,
yeah.
Around, because that thing, what do you say, represents infiniteness. Was that the word?
Yeah, I think that was the word. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so great. So when you're with, you're in that same place. Same thing with birth would be the same. You're in that edge of awakenings, and then you experience that infiniteness. So it's great.
Yeah.
Great. We're happy.
Yeah, I just wanted, before we end, I'd like to give a shout out to some of the people who've been really supporting us heavily and fabulous. Carol Asher and Shruti Asher Colbert, that we met them at the retreat, and they're just always giving us great feedback, and many other people too. But just wanted a special shout out to them, and thanks for supporting us, and everybody out there who's been listening. Your feedback is essential and very interesting. So thank you.
That's great, and thanks for supporting us. We are starting to see more people feeling like this is worth something, so that they go to Amazon and buy their stuff through our portal, or go to Audible, or now go to the store, buy a T-shirt or a mug. And again, we thank you, and we will see you next week on Mindrolling Podcast.
Arrivederci.
Okay. Bye-bye.